We're very excited to be supporting again a local author here tonight, Glenn Parry. Harlan McCostato, would you all like to take it over and talk about Glenn's new book, Original Politics?
Sure.
All right, I'll leave it to you.
All right, thank you very much, Amanda. And my name is Harlan McCostato. I am from the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma, which is in central Oklahoma, and was the host of Native American Calling for about 15 years, produced or hosted about 3,500 shows. And Glenn and I have known each other for since '99, I believe, about 21 years. And we have become good friends. And we are collaborating on this because Glenn has put out a new book, which you need to pick up. It's called Original Politics, Making America Sacred Again. And pretty good book. And Glenn is a author of a novelist award-winning book, Original Thinking, a Radical Remaining or Revisioning of Time, Humanity, and Nature. And that was published in 2015. And he's an educator. He is a eco-psychologist. Is that right, Glenn?
That's right.
He is also a political philosopher, which is kind of how we found each other in the first place. He was the founder and past president of the Seed Institute. He's currently the director of a grassroots think tank, the Circle for Original Thinking. So welcome to the program, Glenn.
Thank you, Harlan. Thank you. It's a joy to be here with such wonderful company. Zoom is now how so many of us are living our lives. We go to Zoom, we Zoom, and then we stop and we resume, and we just keep zooming around. So I'm so glad to see the faces of people in the Hollywood Square boxes. So Harlan and I, as he mentioned, you know, we did meet in 1999, and I have to give Harlan, this man, a lot of credit because he called me up when the Seed Institute did our very first conference that brought together Native American elders and Western scientists. And Harlan got wind of it, and he wanted to cover it for Native America Calling, and in fact covered it for all 13 years. And that was an incredible blessing. And some of those people that you interviewed on Native America Calling, they're now ancestors. I mean, the prayer for Dan Moonhawk Alford, grandfather Leon Secatero, Tobasanequit Canoe. Those are some of the powerful ancestors that not only were on Native America Calling, were in the dialogue circle, and they so enriched and blessed my own life. And I think I could say, Harlan, I think they did for you too. So thank you so much. I turn it back over to you.
Yeah, you're certainly welcome. You know, one of the things that caught my eye was, I mean, first of all, the title, Making America Sacred Again. So what exactly does that mean, making it sacred again?
Well, you know, obviously I'm playing off of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, but there's a huge difference between being great and being sacred. And when I think of great, I think of the 1927 Yankees, you know, Babe Ruth, 60 home runs, Lou Gehrig, you know, powerful, dominant team. But it doesn't, you know, sacred is a totally different feeling. I mean, it comes from the Latin saccare, to devote or dedicate. It's really about invoking the whole. And original politics itself is about invoking the whole, going beyond the human realm and doing things for the benefit of all our relations, considering the natural world in the decisions we make. You know, so it's also being sacred. When I say making America sacred again, I'm talking about not just the nation, but the land. So the land was sacred for always. And of course, it was called Turtle Island. It wasn't called America at first. It was called Turtle Island. And that was a very sacred place. Having a sacred relationship with your place of origin is so important. And that's something that we need to learn to do again. And we need to expand our definition of politics and take it out of the human realm and bring it into the realm where we're considering all of our relations, the whole natural world.
Now, you are Basque Jewish, of course, and I'm missing one.
Aragon Spanish.
Aragon, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So you come from tribes. Now, is
That's
that
right.
something that ties in with your sort of attraction to Native peoples? Because that's one thing I noticed right off the bat, is that you were, you know, very attracted to the tribes and tribal history. And tell me a little bit about your tribes and, you know, how your tribal background affected your, like I say, your attraction to the Native American background.
Sure. Well, you know, I was blessed to grow up with mi abuela. My grandmother was Basque, and so my father's mother walked 300 miles from the high Pyrenees of Spain, got a job as a chef's attendant in Barcelona, and then when the chef moved to New York City, she moved along with him. My father was actually born in Mexico City. He was, my grandmother and her husband were there for 1 year. And then after that, he grew up in Harlem, New York City. But that my grandmother lived with us. And I was, see, you said tummy rubs wouldn't come up, but they are. You know, she used to give me tummy rubs. If I had a stomachache, it was the laying on of hands. So it was a great blessing. And the Basque, of course, are sheep herders. I mean, when we visited that, my grandmother's village, when I was 14, I mean, we were one of the first automobiles, or if not the first automobile that ever came into that village. And they lived with the animals. In the winter, the animals were the heat. The animals were, we were feasted with a meal of, you know, lamb, beef and rabbit, and I went back to my 7th grade class, and my teacher, Mr. Fisher, said, you know, he was talking about the index of poverty and saying how people have to have a certain amount of money to be not poor. And I said, well, I don't think so, because my relatives in Spain don't have any money, but they're rich, and they were. And yeah, they needed some dental work, but they were rich, and they were really rich in spirit. And I think that might have had something to do with my particular attraction to Navajo peoples in this land, you know, and it's how, because they're also obviously sheep herders, and I did, but I'm not sure, that just could be. But it did feel like coming home, the philosophies of Native America. It feels like coming home. Yeah. By the way, is it okay if I read something about sacred, Harlan?
Certainly, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because this is a launch of the book, I wanted to read a little something that actually comes from part 4 of the book, which is all about return to wholeness. But this chapter 13 begins, it's called Making America Sacred Again, First Step. And it begins like this. Dolores Lewis Garcia and Emma Lewis Mitchell of Acoma Pueblo learned how to make traditional pottery from their mother, the renowned Acoma potter, Lucy Lewis. To make a new pot, they always begin with shards of old pots. This is the traditional way of honoring the ancestors, of bringing the sacred energies of the past into the present. I find this process amazing and inspirational in so many respects. The fragmented shards are repurposed, creating a new whole, and the new pot joins the past and present in an original creation of timeless beauty. This is a metaphor for what I mean by original politics, ancient wisdom repurposed for today, creating a new wholeness. The shards represent today's fragmented society, cut off from what is most needed, perennial wisdom, in this time of chaos and strife. Our task now is to recollect how to put our fragmented society back together. We need to make a new pot, a beautiful pot, expansive enough to include not only many diverse people, but also all the animals, plants, and minerals of this land. We need to reconstellate this nation from its disparate parts, from all the different colors, religions, ethnic backgrounds, political parties, and beliefs. We need to once again, from the many, make one, and this time not leave anyone out. All men, all women, all people, and all life are created equal. Humanity and nature, including all the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, must come together in harmony. Pottery is a beautiful art form because in the process of its creation, it brings together the whole of life. It takes all the elements, earth and clay, water, air, and fire to make a pot. And then according to Dolores and Emma, it is not just a pot, but a living being. They say that every pot they make has a spirit. America has a spirit too, and it is one in need of rekindling.
Not too shabby. But you know, one of the issues that the book is founded on is the fact that, you know, most Americans are not aware of the influence that Native Americans had on the founding of America. And I wanted to ask you, you know, what kind of influence that the Iroquois Confederacy had on the founding of America, because that's something that's, you know, it's not taught in history books. And it's, as far as I know, you know, even Native schools, and, you know, they don't teach it. And, you know, it's not till later that most Native Americans find out about that history. So can you tell us a little bit about you know, the influence that the Iroquois Confederacy had on the development of America?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to address that. You know, I mean, it makes sense that that for 150 years or more since Mayflower Pilgrims came, the settlers, European settlers, were living side by side with Native Americans. And of course, they mixed. Of course, they observed each other. And there were some wonderful quirks of fate that really created the massive impact that you're speaking about, though, because some people just were more sensitive to Native cultures and were more interested in learning from them. And Ben Franklin was one of those people. And he had a long history with Native America. Of course, Ben Franklin was a printer. So he was printing treaties that were between Native Americans, the Native American nations, and the US government. And when Ben Franklin became part of the Pennsylvania Assembly, he wrote often about those treaties, and often he took the side of the Indians. And that, rumor has it, cost him to his assembly seat. But then he was appointed commissioner, Indian commissioner. He basically was asked by our mother country, Britain, to build a military alliance with the Iroquois, who were an incredibly powerful confederacy who had been around by some estimates from 1132 AD. And they asked Ben Franklin to form a military alliance and other people, but Ben Franklin was in there. And they didn't realize that when they were asking him that they were planting the seed for deep, abiding friendship, particularly between Ben Franklin and Chief Kana Astego, who was the Onondaga chief, who on July 4th, it's interesting, it's July 4th, not very long from now, July 4th, 1744, addresses the colonists and tells them basically that, why don't you unite like the five fingers of one hand? Why don't you do as we have done in our powerful confederacy? If you don't fall out with one another, you'll be stronger. And he also reenacts, legend has it that he reenacts a part of the Peacemaker story, which is a powerful story of how the Iroquois Confederacy was formed in the first place to become an instrument of peace, not of war, because the tribes were warring amongst each other until they formed that confederacy. And so what he did is he actually gave Ben Franklin a single arrow. And then he grabbed it back from him quickly and he broke it across his knee. And then he reached behind him and he pulled out a bundle, a sheaf of arrows. And he tried to break that across his knee, but of course they would not break. And the message was plain to all. And Ben Franklin never forgot that. And in fact, when the Great Seal of the United States was designed, that's why in the left talon of the eagle, we have the bundled arrows, representing the strength, unity from the diverse colonies uniting. But that wasn't it. It was way more than that. Ben Franklin actually took the principles of the Great Law of Peace and used them to create the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation, which have kind of been lost in the history of the American nation. When we go to school, they just teach you about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And they completely ignore the Articles of Confederation, which were actually ratified in 1781 and were continued to be in effect until 1789. So for 8 years, they were in effect. And in fact, they were even in effect before they were ratified. But the Articles of Confederation were very different from the Constitution in certain ways. Imagine this: public servants, all the elected officials, had to serve for free. Nobody was paid anything, not a thing. That was in the Articles of Confederation. And when we came to the Constitutional Convention, Ben Franklin still advocated for that, but he was overruled by much younger men. I mean, you know, I think Hamilton was 28 years old and Madison was 32. Our founding fathers were very young. I mean, maybe they saw a future in politics, maybe a career. I don't know, but they didn't agree with the idea of working for nothing. And but they did try to retain some of the things that were in the Articles of Confederation, like the emoluments clause, which nobody ever seemed to even hear about till recently, but it's in the news all the time now. So you're not supposed to take gifts from foreign powers and whatnot. So some of that was left in, but I go on too long. I turn it back to you, Harlan. There's so much more. There's so much more. I mean, let me just say a couple more things. I mean, the very principles of
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting wound up, but the very principles of liberty, justice, equality, inalienable rights, they all come, in my view, they come from Native America. I'm not saying these things didn't exist in Europe, but a lot of times, even the people like John Locke that wrote about life, liberty, and property, actually, which shows up in the Constitution as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, John Locke was influenced by Native Americans. Ever since, you know, Thomas More came over and wrote the book Utopia, Europe was enthralled by the spirit of Native America. And that spirit was what was in the founding of the United States in the best possible way, even though it still hadn't unfolded completely. You know, the liberty and equality applied initially to white male property owners, but eventually it did unfold. Okay, that's all, so stop there. Okay. Back to you, Harlan.
Now, you know, one of the things that when we do learn about the Iroquois Confederacy is that the women had a big role in the politics of the Iroquois Confederacy. In fact, they sometimes, you know, ruled over the men. But that's one part of the equation that was not, well, there was more than that, but that was one big part. That when the United States was founded, you know, the women weren't included at all. They were just, you know, kind of there. And of course, the children had no influence whatsoever. But the big question is about the women. And tell me about the difference between the women in the Iroquois Confederacy and the you know, the role that women had as far as the founding of America. What was the difference there?
Well, yeah, I'd love to speak about that, and I think if you don't mind, I'd like to read a passage because the Haudenosaunee women, the Iroquois women, did have a huge a role in the political process. They appointed they nominated the male chief, and they had the right to remove him by taking off the deer antlers, the symbol of authority, if the man committed malfeasance of any kind. They always had a right to call a women's council together and to bring their voice to the table. They were basically the wisdom council. The women's council were the wisdom council, and the men were given the charge of empowering that strategic vision on behalf of the women and the whole tribe. So that's actually a very beautiful way of masculine and feminine energy to work together. Because, you know, in my humble opinion, men are very good at doing things, but we need direction sometimes. so the women provided that direction and the men enacted that. And so, but the effect, you touched upon something, Harlan, the effect the Haudenosaunee women had on the Western women was enormous. I see Stephen Sachs, you might be leaving. You just want to thank you very much for your help with this book. So thank you very much. He introduced me to a lot of people who are scholars in this field. And thank you to Connie and Andrew who are on the call, because they introduced me to Stephen. But anyway, thank you. Enjoy. Okay, so I want to read something. This is from the influence of Native America on the 19th century women's movement, because it's, you know, how did these first radical suffragists of the United States, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, and Matilda Gage, come to a vision of equality for women? All these women were living in 19th century America, a time when a woman fleeing a violent husband would be routinely returned to him by police, just as runaway slaves were returned to their masters. How did these women, who lived in a society where they were required to pay taxes, but had no voice in the direction of government, could not vote, could not run for office, lost all property rights once they married, had no right of divorce, and if they separated from their husbands, lost all custody rights to their children, whose oppression was sanctioned by the Bible, with their husbands having the legal right and religious responsibility to physically discipline them? How in the world did these women, who were not even permitted to speak aloud in church, have the courage to ask for equal rights? They did so because they were living nearby Native women who befriended them and showed them another way. These Native women were fully equal in their society. Their responsibilities were in balance with men. Their children were members of the mother's clan, and they controlled their own use of property. The Native women's work was satisfying and done alongside other women, as opposed to the mostly isolated drudgery of the colonial household. And they were responsible for agriculture in addition to the home life. Moreover, the women were understood to be spiritually related to Mother Earth herself, a relationship that ensured respect. In fact, they lived in a society where rape and violence toward women was almost unheard of and severely punished if it were to occur. These Native women happened to be Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois, the same group that strongly influenced the founding fathers of the United States. But in truth, they could have been from any number of other tribes with similar traditions of equality for women. Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, the women were pretty much the head of our households, like where I grew up. Let me ask you this, something else. Okay, the book is named Original Politics, Making America Sacred Again, but I want to focus in kind of on this symbol here, where you have a white buffalo, an eagle, and is that a serpent that's circling in?
Snake. Yeah, it's a snake eating its own tail. Would you like me to speak about those symbols?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the snake eating its own tail is called Ouroboros, Carl Jung wrote a lot about it, but you know, it's a very sacred symbol, and it's really a symbol of wholeness. It's also often associated with the womb. It's often a feminine symbol, but it's wholeness. I also enjoyed putting that particular symbol on there because of a quote Gandhi once said. Mahatma Gandhi once said that because he was a spiritual man, but he was also a political figure, you know. And Gandhi once said that he couldn't avoid politics. That politics was like a snake that encircled everything, and that I choose to wrestle with the snake, he said. So that was one reason for putting it there. The symbol of the eagle is both a symbol that's powerful in normal American symbology and also in Native America, where the eagle is a messenger to the gods, or a messenger to the spirits above, that can take your prayers up to higher realms. And the white buffalo is a symbol of peace, forthcoming peace. And so it's a very, very important symbol in Native America. And when white buffalo have been born, calves have been born in this century and in the 20th century. And it is considered a harbinger of peace. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Harlan Macosito, and we're talking with Glenn Parry, who's in Albuquerque, lives in Albuquerque. And we're talking about his new book called Original Politics, Making America Sacred Again. And the show is sponsored today, I guess you could say that. It is sponsored today by Bookworks, and that we're talking about the book, but we're also talking about some other things. And then one of the things that's a little off track here, Glenn, but it seems like you are influenced by lots of Native people, but there's one that comes to mind called named Grandpa Leon Secretero, I believe.
Mm.
And yeah, I know you guys were pretty close. And tell me a little bit about his teachings that he had, that he sort of gave to you, and why you respected him so much.
Sure. Thank you. Well, Grandfather Leon Secretero, when he spoke, his voice was like music. You know, he had a mellifluous voice and a very, not a loud voice. In the very first dialogue that Seed organized in 1999, there was a woman, you know, and there was a learning curve at those dialogues. People learned, so I'm not going to say, I don't even know who it was anyway, but there was a woman that was in the back of the room, and Grandfather Leon was speaking, and she said, "Can you speak louder?" And then a native person said immediately, "Can you move closer?" And that was a really intelligent thing to say, because you don't do that with a native elder. And, you know, when Grandfather Leon spoke, people came up to him, you know, almost like, you know, St. Francis, you know, with animals or something, you know, they came up to him and they listened, because he had a very peaceful spirit. His own children, Orlando Secretero, his eldest son, who's a wonderful flute player and a medicine person himself, Elvira Yazzie, who's his eldest daughter, Renee Secretero. His own children and Sean Secatero also, who teaches at UNM in the Native Studies program. All of his children said that Leon never got angry at them. Could you imagine having a father that never got angry at you?
No, you can't.
So
yeah, I only had one, and he got angry quite a bit.
Yeah, I understand, but you know, so Leon had a special ability to, if somebody was angry, he had the patience to wait for that to pass. He saw that energy and he allowed it to pass. I think that might be the single greatest teaching he ever offered to me, and it's one that I certainly haven't mastered. But you know, if we can be in the moment and see energy like that and allow it to diffuse itself, then there really is an opportunity for peace and healing. So, I mean, he's just one of the more peaceful people. And that was amongst his teachings, you know. And he also is the person who brought me to the sacred grounds, the Cañoncito Band of Navajo. And that place, the power of that place, which I see Mike Three Bears, as I think was on the call earlier, he's been there with me. That place is a place of immense power. Remember when I said in the beginning that making America great again is about power and dominance? Well, things that are sacred have power too, but the power isn't in the human ego, it's the power of the place. And so he taught me about that. And, you know, he taught me a great deal of things. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, I met him a couple of times, and yeah, he was quite the man. Anyway, let's talk about another thing that caught my attention in the book was the love that Native. Seems like you wrote a little bit, or maybe even a lot, about love and how Natives had a special love, not only for the land, but for each other, and you know, even for their new neighbors that came from Europe. That might have not been not a lot of love, but just if you could talk about that for a little bit. But I know you mentioned the love that Natives showed that I think might have had an influence on the founding of America.
Yeah, I do want to talk about love, but in the book I also talk, and I'll get to that in a second. But in the book I also talk about coming to terms with our shadow. You know, coming to terms with our shadow, and I also talk about building a foundation of respect before talking about love. You know, in the last political campaign, there were two candidates, Marianne Williamson and Cory Booker, who talked openly about love, and they didn't get any traction. And it could be, and I think it is, because America's not ready to hear that yet. Because we need to deal with our shadow first. And honestly, Donald Trump has been a catalyst for the revealing of the American shadow. That can be a very good thing. It can also be a dangerous thing, you know. So by giving license for certain shadow figures to emerge, we're also on the precipice of civil war, really. And we're even reliving the Civil War. Look what happened at Charlottesville. But Donald Trump also has a special unusual capacity for being one of the biggest liars that we've ever had as American president, and also a truth teller who will say things no other president would ever say. So at Charlottesville, when he said, you know, what are you going to do with George Washington? He was a slave owner. You know, what about Thomas Jefferson? Well, he was a major slave owner. What are you going to tear down those statues? Well, he actually was saying something I've never heard any American president say before that was truthful. So in a weird kind of way, we're in this perfect storm where our shadow is being revealed, which gives us an opportunity to heal. And the story I tell in the book, which I'll just share here, very short story, comes from the White Mountain Apache, and it goes like this. This is a story that really describes where we are in America today. It's about an old woman. An old woman is weaving a beautiful rug. And as she nears completion of this rug, she gets up to stir a soup that's on the fire. But while she gets up, her black dog, who's been sleeping in the corner, awakens and comes up to the rug and pulls on a thread with its mouth and unravels the whole rug. So when the woman returns, she sees the rug, then where there was beauty and harmony, there's now chaos and disorder. There's chaos and disorder at the door.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
So, and the woman is unfazed. She's unfazed by the doorbell ringing. She's unfazed by the dog. And she stares into the rug for the longest time. And then she picks up a thread and she reimagines how to reweave the rug in an even more beautiful way. That's where America is today. We have an opportunity to reweave a more beautiful rug, but we're also in the midst of a very difficult period where our shadow is coming forward. But hopefully we'll watch it. Hopefully we'll learn. And then hopefully we'll start speaking to each other with respect, because that's one thing I talk about also. I mean, it's what John McCain was crying out for in the last weeks of his life was, you know, just a return to regular order in Congress. That doesn't sound like something very sexy, but regular order is the process by which minority input is allowed. It goes back to the spirit of America, and something I neglected to mention really that's important, Harlan, is dialogue. Native America instilled in the founding government principles of protocol that are still there today. There were 21 Iroquois braves that came to the very first meeting of the Continental Congress before we even declared a split from our mother country. And in that initial meeting, they got people to agree to not interrupt each other. That's why we're so different from our mother country today. In the British Commons, people jump up and dance and yell and scream, and you can insult anybody. You're not allowed to do that in the US Congress. And that actually came from Native America. So the restoration of respect through dialogue is really important. Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, tried to do it with a talking staff. She brought out a talking staff. She brought out a talking staff and she initiated these meetings just like we used to see. But the Congress people who are respectful on the Senate floor are not necessarily respectful outside of that environment. This was a bipartisan meetings held in Susan Collins' office, and they didn't quite get the concept. So one senator interrupts another, causing the senator who was speaking to, quote unquote, forcefully deliver the talking staff. He flung the talking staff at the other person who interrupted him. And it actually went past him and broke a glass elephant that was on Susan Collins' shelves. And, you know, the glass the elephant being the symbol of the Republican Party, what an event that was, right? So then Susan Collins, showing a sense of humor, switched to a rubber ball and continued. And those dialogues actually helped. They helped. That was held during the government shutdown. And they did come to some bipartisan agreement. So, you know, dialogue is one of the deepest loves in my heart. I see Beth Macy there, hi. And she knows about dialogue, and I think David Vogel was on there. I don't know if he's there anymore. He knows, yeah, he knows about dialogue. I mean, dialogue is a beautiful thing. If you have to listen, if people listen to each other for the purpose of understanding rather than just to answer with their agenda, there's a chance of shift and change. And then there's an opportunity for love and compassion, which is how I end the book. And I ended talking about the 60s, you know, and Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, and how they spoke about love and compassion in a very compelling way. And I also talk about even the Woodstock generation and the hippie communes, because the strangest thing is those hippie communes modeled themselves after Native Americans, if you ever think about it, you know, growing the hair long, returning to the land. So some of those seeds planted in the
hippies every now and then.
Yeah, that's enough said. I turn it back to you, Harlan, and I don't know if we're going to bring in the members who have gathered too. So but back to you, Harlan.
I'm not either. I'm not quite sure if we're going to bring in anybody to ask a question. But I think it might be a good idea.
Do you want to do
if that's possible.
Maybe you can do one or two more, and then we'll address some of the questions that are popping up in the chat.
Okay. One or two more of what I think we're probably ready, right, Harlan?
Okay.
We're
unless he has.
I can't think of you know, anything that needs to be said as far as the book, except that it's coming out. When did it come out? Just recently?
June 16th. It's out. Yeah. It's out for a week. And I encourage people to support your local bookstore and buy from Bookworks. If you want to hear me read you the book, I made an audio book too.
Oh.
But yeah.
You can definitely buy audio and ebooks on our website, as well as the hard. Of course, if you get the hard copy, then we'll send you a signed book plate as well, so that you can have a signed copy from this virtual event. Richard Posey is our first question. He says he's participating from Dayton, Ohio. He says he's hoping Glenn might speak a little bit about linear time versus unitive or circular time, and the concept of liminal space, Janice from the book, as the doorway between knowing and unknowing. He says it seems this is the key to the difference between a Western mind and the indigenous mind. Do you want to talk a little bit more about time?
Sure. I always love to talk about time, because time is infinite. But I first want to acknowledge, I didn't see him before, but Kenji Sugihara, that's my publisher from Select Books, New York City. Are you there, Kenji? I see your name. Okay, there, he's in the dark. But anyway, yeah, Select Books is a wonderful publisher. I've just so much enjoyed working with them. And Kenichi Sugihara might be on the call too, I don't know. But I don't see him in the Hollywood squares. But time, yes. Time is, it's a very important subject. In my first book, Original Thinking, I dealt with that a lot because I see that as the divide between Western world and the indigenous world. So, you know, everybody used to measure time as a circle. You know, Plato and Aristotle understood that time unfolded as a circle. But somewhere the West began to look more toward the future. Maybe it was an intuition from the biblical idea of greater future beyond. I don't know, but in the Renaissance, and this is a deep philosophical question, so I'll try to answer it in 3 minutes. But in the Renaissance, we have the invention of linear perspective in art, and at that point, the Western mind starts to imagine that the future is ahead of them. So everyone understands the principle of linear perspective, and the lines going away from the single solitary eye are going in the future. We even have it in our language. We say something's going to happen in the near future, or something's going to happen in the distant future. So we look into the future, and when we look to the future, that was really a shift, as my dearly departed ancestor Dan Moonhawk Alford taught me. The ancient Greeks thought the opposite, just like the Maori do today, and probably a lot of indigenous peoples. They thought of the past as in front of them, where it had already manifested, and so that's why they could see it. And the future was behind them, where they couldn't see it. And it was coming up behind them, if you've ever read Carlos Castaneda, like death stalking you from behind. So you can't see death, you can't see the future. That's why the ancient Greeks went to oracles. But once we thought that we could see the future, we try to predict and control it. And I also think it's the seed of colonization, because we then begin to have this idea. We confuse distance from the origin for progress, and we start measuring ourselves that way. And I'll just leave it at that, because it's an immensely deep question. All right. All right.
Well, speaking of time, we were scheduled to go off at 7, but I don't think we're limited by time. We're going to keep going until we finish up.
No, we can keep going through the questions. That's just, we're keeping questions to round but we're good. If you need to leave the event, you can always feel free to do that at any time. We are recording right now, so if you want to see what happens after you've left, you can do that by going to our website. There's a video link under the events tab. We also have a YouTube channel, and we post most of these on Facebook. So I'll have this video edited up in the next day or two, and you can find that recording on any of those channels that way. We've got a question from David Vogel, who I'm sure you remember from the Seed Dialogues. He is saying, what a wonderful conversation, so meaningful to our current times. My question relates to how you think we might go about the task of engaging others with different worldviews in this important conversation. And David, I can unmute you if you'd like to chat with Glenn directly, but thank you for your question. Glenn, what do you think about that?
I think it's a great question. I think David is a wise person who knows a lot of the answer is to listen, and listen for the purpose of understanding. So basically, one thing I say in the book is that you can't avoid politics. Politics is life, I mean, it's politics, but, in your family, or politics in your office or something. There's always politics, but what we can do, the learning curve in politics, like in life, is listening to people who have a different view than you do. And maybe David would like to add to that.
I can't add too much, but I think a starting point is trust. And establishing trust is a prerequisite to having a conversation. And I remember being at dinner, Glenn, with you and a couple of elders during one of the Seed Dialogues. We were discussing the prospects for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the United States, and I was surprised by some of the comments from some of the elders saying, why would we do that? Because you haven't honored a treaty yet. And so that trust was precluding the conversation from starting, and we had to stop for a moment, or for a while, and think about trust development in order to have the conversation. And then we can be in the room together in a meaningful way. So there's an order to things that as you've said several times, Glenn, and the way you've framed some of these concepts and these important ideas is so beautiful and meaningful. I can't say how much I appreciate what you've written.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The next question comes from Lloyd Hansen, and he says, Glenn, does the book suggest concrete actions or practices that people can use to make the world sacred again? And do you have any thoughts on how to create connections among us walking the path of the sacred?
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, I would say it does. There are some basic things that in part 4, Return to Wholeness, I mean, the first chapter is a lot about restoring regular order, listening, dialogue, some of the things we've talked about. Those are very important steps. But ultimately, I'm suggesting a step from not just returning to normal, but returning to natural. So, and I'm suggesting and doing my best to inspire love of nature, you know, because I really believe that we must love the natural world before we'll start loving each other. We'll never love each other while we're drilling for oil through water. You know, it's just not going to happen completely, because we're ignoring the fact that we're 70% water. We're related to that. Water is our closest relative, really, you know, and so a love of nature, love of the elements, which is something that I've learned a lot from Native America, but ultimately we have to learn that for ourselves. I mean, everybody, you know, if you were participating in a Native American ceremony, that's great. But you could also be going out in your backyard and communing with your sunflower, which I was doing about a half an hour before this started. We have just a magnificent sunflower that was in front of this big, dark, foreboding cloud behind, but the sun was still peeking through. And the sunflower is a pretty inspiring symbol, because it's not a symbol, it's real. I mean, it's really following the sun. And but so does a dung beetle, you know, follow the stars. So there's a lot of symbols in nature that we could tune into. And if we do that, that's great. I see David Boji came on the call there, and just a few days ago, David, Mike Two Bears, and I were in a beautiful example of politics in action, because David was interested in preserving wetlands in Las Cruces, which have been under immense assault. And with David's encouragement, we had a political meeting that began with prayer, set a sacred space. Mike Three Bears said a prayer, and that created a sacred space, so that when we engaged in discussion about the laws and the coding and stuff, it was all within that sacred container. That really works. And I don't know if David would like to say something about that, or Mike. But.
Yeah, let me try to unmute David. There we go. Hi, David.
Oh, hi. I'm just really grateful, Glenn. I love the book. I've been devouring it since it arrived. And congratulations. And I really appreciate you and Mike Three Bear and Joyce creating a sacred space for that meeting. And while we've had peace at the pond, I'm showing the pond with water. It's an ephemeral pond, but thank you so much. Thank you so much, and best of luck on the book. I hope everybody reads it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, David.
All right. Our next question comes from another David Cordova from San Antonio. He says, with respect to the seminal work of David Bohm and J. Krishnamurti concerning time and meditation, how can the pandemic and our sheltering and isolation serve to encourage a restart toward an enhanced new normal?
Wow. What a great question. What amazing philosophers we have amongst us. I think that there is the definition of crisis is danger and opportunity. My wife Tomoko would correct people that say that it's the same word because it's too, in Chinese or the character. So she's not Chinese, she's Japanese, but she knows the Chinese character that's used in Japan, the same character. But danger and opportunity coexisting is the situation that we are in now. And frankly, we've been in it ever since the Trump presidency, and to some degree in the Obama presidency as well. But the pandemic especially, it occurred to me that, the way Donald Trump was governing, he made himself the focus. He was a trickster figure. We could have talked about that, tonight. He was a figure that stirred everything up, just like the black dog. He's the black dog in the picture, in the story I told before. But he got upstaged by a new trickster figure almost in the coronavirus, which a little tiny virus became even more fearsome and more disruptive. But one of its disruptions gave us a great opportunity to go into stillness, to go into our own home, to cease the activities that we were doing so incessantly. And Mother Earth has experienced a great breath, a sigh of relief when that happened. Waters are getting cleaner. Air is getting cleaner. And, that gives us an opportunity going forward, hopefully, to rethink our fixation on economic growth and living in that way, because you cannot grow infinitely on a finite planet. So the very principles that all politicians tend to agree with, and by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative or independent, they're all for maximum growth, if you've ever noticed. So liberals are for growth because they can spend more. Conservatives are for growth because they can cut more taxes. Independents are also for growth. Bernie Sanders is for growth. So, but we really need to moderate our growth and we have to substitute new values. I mean, it's the Cree Indian proverb that says that, when the last tree is cut down, the last stream poisoned, only then will we realize that we cannot eat money.
Okay, Glenn, as we move toward the end of the program here, this is a trilogy. Now, the first one you had was Original Thinking, a radical revisioning of time, humanity, and nature. And of course, this one is called Original Politics, Making America Sacred Again. And I guess it's available right now. So be sure and look into that. And I agree with Glenn that, we need to support our local bookstores. But the question I have, Glenn, is, okay, so you wrote that, you wrote this one. What's the third one going to be about?
Well, we could bring in Tomoko, my wife, because 5 years ago, she told me, just out of the blue, after Original Thinking came out, she told me one morning, and she never says something like this, but she says, "You're going to write a book called Original Love." And so I said, well, that seemed kind of daunting. but I wrote it down, and I started a computer folder, said Original Love, but I didn't do anything about it. And then a year later, this woman in Taos, Jean Ellis Sankari, and she is talking to me about teaching at UNM Taos, and she interrupts herself in the middle of a sentence, and she says, in true Taoseño fashion, she says, "I just got a download. You're going to write a book called Original Love, and it's going to be the third in a 3-part series of books with original in the title." So then, here's the really funny thing about the story. For 2 years, I changed the title of Original Politics to Sacred Politics. And I, you know, I shouldn't have, you know, I got this clear message from the universe, doubled, but I changed it to Sacred Politics. But then my wife comes to me again and she says, you know, about a year, just a little over a year ago, she says, you know, there's an Islamic scholar that's writing a book called Sacred Politics. So, well, you can't copyright a title, but I thought, well, that's probably not a good idea because the Islamic scholar is going to make it about theocracy. It's going to be about the merging of politics and religion, which was not what I intended. And so I said, well, I should go back to Original Politics. And the computer folder, which also seems to have some kind of unconscious knowledge, it never changed. It always said Original Politics. I never changed that folder. It knew what was going to happen. Just like my wife Tomoko knew what was going to happen, and the woman Jean Ellis Sankari knew what was going to happen. So I changed back to Original Politics. And after that, the momentum picked up. You know, it was easy to finish the book. And I had to explain it to my publisher, Kenji, because he liked the title Sacred Politics, and that's what the book proposal was submitted as. And I said, but we got to go back to Original Politics because creator wants this. And so, in fact, that's what happened. And the book flowed beautifully and then ended with love. So and then here's the amazing thing about it. I got to download my own download for how I'll write the book Original Love. And it's not going to be about romantic love, or that'll be a very small portion. It'll really be about rekindling love for Mother Earth. So that's really what that book is going to be about.